Good evening. Welcome to the program. Coming to you tonight from my home in Maryland once again, due to the COVID-19 global pandemic. It is quite disruptive, but it's also a disease that is quite deadly. Therefore, we should all take caution to be careful. And that leads me to my opening observation. Today, the governor of Maryland issued a stay-at-home order, basically stating that all Maryland residents are to stay at home and to only leave their homes in cases of a medical emergency or to get food. This is what he said. He said, quote, "This is a public health crisis. We are no longer asking or suggesting that Marylanders stay at home. We are directing them to do so." Now, to freedom-loving Americans, this may sound like an intrusion upon our civil liberties, our constitutional rights. But the pandemic, folks, is very real and it's very deadly. And everyone should do their best to protect each other as well as their communities. And if we truly love freedom, isn't it important to follow the advice that will keep us alive to exercise that freedom? In addition to that, if we are truly the land of the free and the home of the brave, isn't it also good that we are brave enough and courageous enough to stand down on certain liberties to stay safe and well? After all, what we do today in following the advice of good health experts and our government leaders may protect us so that we have our freedoms to hold dear and exercise tomorrow when we get through this. And those are my opening observations. As you know, we are dealing with a global pandemic. COVID-19, the coronavirus, is spreading throughout the world. And here in the United States, well, we have the dubious distinction of now leading the world in that category of the number of cases. The death toll climbs and the number of cases continues to climb of people testing positive for it. The president said on Sunday, and I'm quoting him here, "We will be extending our guidelines to April 30th to slow the spread." The president, like Dr. Anthony Fauci and all of us, really want to flatten the curve. And joining me now is Paris Denard. He is an advisor to President Trump. And Paris, thank you for being on the program today. These are indeed perilous times in which we are living. How do you see it going in terms of how the White House is handling this through the COVID-19 task force?
Well, Kelly, thank you for having me on the program today. It's really important for the American people to listen and watch these press conferences, because this is where we're getting the news, and this is where we're getting the information that our community needs straight from the source. And I think the president and the entire whole of government approach is really effective. And I think the American people are responding positively to it. It's a rare time where we're taking politics and putting it to the side and looking for action, looking for bipartisanship, but also looking at these incredible public-private partnerships that are happening, with the private sector stepping up and saying, you know what, yes, Mr. President, yes, federal government, I'm going to come to the aid of my fellow man. I'm going to come to the aid of our consumers because it's the right thing to do. Profits aside, we've got to be there for our neighbor. And I think the American people can appreciate it. They appreciate the fact that the governors are working on both sides of the aisle. Republican and Democrat governors are working with President Trump to get things done for the American people. And that is the most important thing, that we can get things done for the people, flatten the curve, and find a cure and heal the land.
Heal the land is definitely right. And the president has been applauded for making an extension of the guidelines. But, you know, he's also been criticized, as well as certain members of the political parties. I hate to bring politics into all of this. It is an elephant in the room where some people have criticized the messaging, if you will, of the president and that of his health team, Dr. Anthony Fauci. What do you say to the American people there about the disruption of the unity in messaging?
Well, listen, I think that we are dealing with things in real time. And all of the messaging that are coming out, whether it's the governors of some of the hot spots in California, or the governors in the hot spots like New York, and now we see that New Orleans and Louisiana is becoming another hot spot. things are happening in real time. Governors and state and local officials, as well as the federal response team that is put together by the president, headed up by Vice President Trump, with the scientists and the doctors like Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx, are doing their very best to get as much information to the American people, to each citizen, in real time. And with the changing dynamics of this virus, they're studying the data, they're studying the models, and they're making the best decisions that they can. At the end of the day, people elect these government officials, politicians, presidents for their decision-making ability, because this is what makes leadership makes leaders. It's what they do in times of crisis. It's how they handle situations across the board. And so I think you may get a lot of different messaging that comes out, but ultimately we have to understand that these people are doing the very best that they can to get us the facts, to get us the data, analyze it, and make decisions that are going to keep Americans safe and keep the economy going. Because what we know is that, especially for the Black community, small businesses are the backbone of not just America, but for the Black middle class. And so we have people who rely on our businesses for food, for work, compensation, but also these entrepreneurs and these restaurateurs that were thriving and vibrant just a few weeks ago, now on the verge of collapse. The government has to respond. And so that's why we have to be flexible, we have to be nimble, and we have to give people the benefit of the doubt that all of this is unprecedented. And if we tone down the rhetoric and work together and unite as one, like Americans always do, we're going to get through this stronger than ever.
All right, very good point, and which will lead us to our next break. But Paris, I want you to stay with me so we can drill down on the historical tranche of cash that's being given to American people through the CARES Act. We're going to talk about that in just a moment with Paris Denard, an advisor to President Trump. Don't go anywhere. Stick with the Kelly Wright Show here on the Black News Channel. We'll be back in a moment right after this. Welcome back to the program where we're talking about COVID-19 and how President Trump has been dealing with it. He, along with his national team, which also includes a lot of health experts. And of course, the president's also concerned about the economy and keeping the country moving forward, because it will be important that when we get through this, that we can have a bounce back in our economic development, because we all have been disrupted by the coronavirus. Joining me again is Paris Denard, an advisor to President Trump. And Paris, we were talking just before the break about the small businesses being the backbone of the American economy. As you know, Congress passed and the president signed it, a $2 trillion CARE Act, and it goes to the core of trying to help people. This is the first tranche. There's more to be anticipated. I spoke with Congresswoman Karen Bass, the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. She said this is an initial phase, that more will have to be done. What can you tell me right now in terms of the African American community and helping businesses within that community based on this current status of money that's come through the CARES Act?
Yeah, this is something that was very important to the president. This was something that he was working behind the scenes directly with his legislative affairs team, domestic policy team, and the entire administration to work with the Republicans in the Senate at first, and then obviously when it got to the House, to ensure that the American people were at the forefront, at the central focus of this important CARES Act, because the administration is telling the American people that they do care, and we care about the American people, especially our small businesses. And so in this over $2 trillion relief package, there's $350 billion in there for SBA loans. That's the Small Business Administration. There's also money in there, about $10 million allocated for the Minority Business Development Agency for grants. And so I would encourage our small business owners, our entrepreneurs, go to the SBA website, get the information to get access to these loans that can help, especially when it comes to payroll. Look at the things that are in there for the Minority Business Development Agency, because the aid is there, because the goal is to have as little as we don't want any of these small businesses to close. We want people to stay on their payroll. And so when you look at that, it's a holistic approach that's in the CARES Act. There's money in there, an emergency education relief plan in there for historically Black colleges and universities. There's about $1.5 billion that have been allocated and set aside for HBCUs. And so the good thing that the administration did through the Department of Education was, through the CARES Act, it extended the relief that was in terms of paying student loan interest rates. Interest for student loans have been suspended for 6 months, as well as payments to student loans. So I just want your viewers, Kelly, to know that there's a lot of aid that is available to us. The extension of unemployment benefits, that includes part-time workers. If you are a part-time worker, this bill, the CARES Act, that the president signed into law, has provisions for you. There's about $1,200 that's going to each individual that's making under $75,000, as well up to about $3,500 for a family of 4. And those checks should be coming either in the mail within a couple of weeks, or if you filed online and got direct deposit. I want our community to know about the things that are in this bill, and I want them to take advantage of it, because you are not forgotten. The president always talked about not forgetting the most vulnerable and the people who have traditionally been left behind. That's not the case in this bill. It would be a travesty if we, as an American people and as a community, are impacted. You know the old phrase, Kelly, that says, when America gets the cold, Black America gets the flu. Well, this is almost literal in this sense. The Black community is disproportionately impacted, but there is relief in the CARES Act, and we have to take full advantage of it, because the care, the support, the financial impact is great, but the support is there in this bill. And there's going to be more to come.
More to come, exactly, as we also heard from the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Karen Bass, as well as Congressman Bobby Scott, who, of course, is the chair of the Education Labor Committee. And what a Herculean task all of them have had, senators and Congress members, as well as the president and his team. And Paris, where can people go, the people watching this program and watching the Black News Channel, where can they go to get that information?
Yeah, for small business, please go to SBA.gov for the information. Go to all the federal agencies that you're concerned. HUD, go to HUD.gov, SBA.gov, but also the White House website and the coronavirus.gov website has a lot of resources that are available to people. And I just want to put this in, Kelly. This was announced yesterday. The Cigna and Humana announced that they are going to waive co-pays and all fees involved with treatment for coronavirus. So right now, Black audience that is listening, if you have Cigna or Humana, don't worry about paying for the bill that comes from you if you have the coronavirus. And I'm sure others will come on to that. But the CARES Act also includes that it's free testing. So if you do have symptoms, grandma has symptoms, or your uncle has symptoms, or you have symptoms, go get tested. Be safe, because finances are not going to be an issue when it comes to your health and safety. This is
very important to point out, because the Black community is already disproportionately affected by health.
Right.
There are some those disparities could lead to more cases, if you will, of COVID-19 rising in the Black community. So I'm glad you pointed it out as well. Make sure everyone gets tested. Paris Denard, advisor to President Trump, we thank you for joining us on the Kelly Wright Show and bringing us some facts that we can all look at and perhaps find out how we can best safeguard our families. And at the same time, Paris, we want you to be safe and be well.
Likewise, Kelly. Thank you. We'll get through this and we're going to win.
All right. Thank you. God bless you. Welcome back to the Kelly Wright Show. Joining me now is my good friend, the Reverend Dr. Benjamin Chavis, who is a civil rights icon. And we're going to talk about another icon who was known as the Dean of the Civil Rights Movement, and that's the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowery. Doc, weigh in on it for me. He passed, and his passing should not go unnoticed, even in the midst of this pandemic that we're all encountering. He contributed so much, starting there with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in launching the Southern Christian Leadership Conference.
Yes, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowery was one of the founders of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the Reverend David Abernathy. And keep in mind, it was a Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which meant you had Baptist ministers. Dr. King was a Baptist minister, Abernathy was Baptist, but Reverend Lowery was United Methodist. He was a Methodist minister. And there was a combination, it was an ecumenical movement. Andy Young was a reverend. Reverend Andy Young was United Church of Christ minister. I was in the United Church of Christ as a youngster, preparing to become a minister when I started working for SCLC when I was 14. I was the statewide youth coordinator for the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, beginning in the early 1960s up until 1968, when Dr. King was killed in Memphis. But let me say something about Dr. Lowery. As you know, when Dr. King was killed in 1968, the Reverend David Abernathy took over. And of course, Reverend Abernathy, there was some big, big shoes to fill, man. A tragedy like the assassination of Dr. King, who's going to come to keep the organization alive? So we have to credit Dr. Abernathy for keeping the organization alive into the early 1970s. But then from a 10-year period, Dr. Lowery led the SCLC. Dr. Lowery led the SCLC. I started to say NAACP because we were all in NAACP, SCLC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, CORE. You just didn't went in one black organization. You tried to get in every black organization as possible in the 1960s and in the 1970s. But what was outstanding about the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowery, he was not only an eloquent speaker, but he was a theologian. He spoke with passion about the applying of the social gospel, the gospel of Christ, to a social justice movement. And of course, Dr. King was a theologian. That side of SCLC is kind of played down in the mainstream media. But you have to understand, these preachers practice what they preach. Dr. Lowery was also a poet. He was a family man. He would always, when we have staff meetings for Southern Christian Leadership Conference, he invited everybody to bring your families, bring to the retreats we had, bring your families, because everyone knew that all our families also sacrificed to allow their brothers, their husbands, even their sisters. There were women also, Dorothy Cotton and many others in SCLC that played a role. It was men and women, it wasn't just men. But again, Dr. Lowery was a towering leadership figure. And similar to Dr. King, Dr. Lowery would always be concerned with the least of these, Kelly. And even when we would have civil rights marches, he would go back and say, Ben, go back and check on the who's in the back of the line. Make sure that they're straight. What everybody sometimes tries to push to the front of the line, Dr. Lowery was a whole man, a whole preacher, a whole civil rights leader. What I meant by that, he was concerned about the masses. He was concerned about the least of these. He wanted everybody to have freedom, justice, and equality. Excuse me for being so long-winded, but Dr. Lowery, man, was our man. And we're going to sorely miss him. Now we have the responsibility to keep his legacy alive, Kelly. We have a responsibility to raise up a new generation of freedom fighters, a new generation of young millennials. They need to study Dr. Joseph Lowery.
Let me ask you real quickly, because you were talking about how he was a social justice minister who brought the gospel to the poor, and he was always concerned about the least of these.
Yes.
How does that relate to what you're doing through the NNPA, Black Press USA, with the COVID-19 Pandemic Task Force Information Center that Black Press USA has created?
Thank you. Thank you for that's a great segue. And You know, when I went to visit Dr. Lowry a few months ago, I went to his home. He was bedridden at the time, and he was talking about, this is before the coronavirus pandemic, but his concern was that there were pullback from Obamacare. You know, he gave the prayer at Obama's inauguration in 2008. In 2009, the election was in 2008, but the inauguration was in 2009, January. And he gave an eloquent prayer, which was a civil rights prayer. And so this coronavirus, this epidemic, this pandemic that's devastating all communities. One thing about the coronavirus, it's non-discriminatory. It can get Prince Charles, his assistant, it can get people in Buckingham Palace, it can get people in the White House, it can get people in your house and my house. And so we all have to be careful. But I think if Reverend Dr. Lowry, to make a connection, were alive today, he would be vigilant. He was saying that we got to protect ourselves against this virus, but the best way to protect yourself is get the right information. And so I'm thankful that in the National Newspaper Publishers Association, which owns blackpressusa.com, we have established a national coronavirus task force and resource center. We're aggregating the information, then we're disseminating it, Kelly, on a daily basis. And I'm sad to report to you, and I think this is the first television show to know this news, that I've done a survey of all 50 states, and it appears now that of the thousands or more people, 2,000 some people have died, almost 40% are African American. We're only 13 to 50% of the population. So we'll double our population. The morbidity rate, the fatality rate is very high because we were already vulnerable to respiratory diseases before the coronavirus. So I'm appealing particularly to all African Americans, to all people who are listening to the Kelly Wright Show. The coronavirus is deadly. It will kill you. You have to protect yourself, protect your family, wash your hands, wipe off the surfaces, because what we're finding out, people who wash their hands and then don't wash off the surfaces in their homes, you're still vulnerable.
All right, Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you for all of those updates and for your reflections on the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry. And I'll leave this with a quote as we toss to a break. He said, this is a quote from your friend and colleague, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry. His passing should not go unnoticed, but this was his quote. He says, "We know there are no weapons of mass destruction, but there are weapons of misdirection. Millions without health insurance, poverty abounds. For war, billions more, but no more for the poor."
Exactly. I know where that quote came from. That was at the funeral of Coretta Scott King. He gave the most eloquent eulogy, but in the eulogy, he talked about what was going on in the present. That was the kind of character and integrity of the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry. That's a great quote, and it applies today. It applies today, particularly amidst this pandemic of the coronavirus.
Dr. Benjamin Chavis, thank you as always, and the best of everything that you're doing. We thank you for being so proactive in dealing with this global pandemic, and thank you for sharing your insights and reflections on your good friend, the Reverend Dr. Joseph Lowry.
Well, thank you, and I thank you, the Kelly Wright Show, and I thank the Black News Channel. We need information that's vital. When we said, when you first launched the Kelly Wright Show, we said we got vital information, but I would say that we're in a life-death situation. So the good news and the facts and the data that you're reporting on a daily basis, Kelly, is so vitally important. So I encourage everybody to not only listen to your show, but make copies of it, put it on your social media. We got to get this word out. We got to work together, because there's information is not only power, but information is life-saving.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Doc.
God bless.
More of the Kelly Wright Show after this. Welcome back, everyone, to the Kelly Wright Show. Joining me now is State Representative in South Carolina, Gilda Cobb Hunter. Thanks for being a part of the program today.
Kelly, thank you so much for having me.
You have a unique position among legislators, Black legislators in particular. Can you tell me what it is?
Sure, I am fortunate enough to be president of the National Black Caucus of State Legislators. NBCSL is an organization that represents over 700 Black legislators from across the country, including the territories. We've been around for 40 plus years, and we like to think that if you are a Black legislator and if you are a member of any General Assembly, past or present, NBCSL is a home for you.
Well, it certainly is good to know that. And in this age of the COVID-19 global pandemic,
Yes.
what is your group doing to reach out to constituents across the country as this virus could be deadlier in the African American community because of the sheer number of health disparities that our community has?
Exactly, Kelly. And what we've done as an organization, we aren't getting much leadership from the federal level, and state legislators, depending on the state, have had to rely on their governors for direction, in some cases, in some states, mayors. What NBCSL did about 2.5 weeks ago is convene a call of our officers, our committee chairs, our regional leadership, to talk about COVID-19, what it looks like in these individual states, and try to come to terms with some direction that we ourselves could get educated about the issue, be aware of what's going on, so that we can inform our constituents. Because the one thing that we don't want to do at NBCSL is provide misinformation and misdirection. There is enough of that going around. And so we are developing, we have a COVID-19 work group. We are developing messages that will help keep our constituents safe. And I do want to point out that it is a joint effort with our corporate roundtable. We had a call on Friday with members of our corporate roundtable. They represent industries across the spectrum, some of which are integrally involved in this issue of COVID-19. And so, for example, we are able on our website to share information with our members who are forced to have constituents teaching kids at home, educational resources that they can use for the period that they're going to be homeschooling their kids.
I was agreeing with you. I was agreeing with you because the educational component is so important.
Oh, yeah.
I've spoken with Congresswoman Karen Bass, who is the obviously the chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, as well as Congressman Bobby Scott, who's chair of the House Education and Labor Committee, and it's vital to them that the African American community understand.
Oh, yeah.
In the challenge of COVID-19 pandemic, we have so much to do beyond health, but also our economic and our educational health. That's why I was actually shaking my head and agreeing with you, because it's important that our legislators pay attention to that and how we can keep our children educated in the middle of this. We can't lose direction.
Yeah, one of the things, Kelly, I think this has shown a whole lot of folk is what a tough job teachers have. And so we have got to be about the business of improving teacher pay. And I won't go down that road because we aren't here to talk about that. But you mentioned Chairwoman Bass, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. And we at NBCSL have had the pleasure under her leadership of working with the CBC on a variety of things. One of the things that we are most appreciative of is the fact that the House is Democratic controlled. So in the stimulus package that was passed last week, there were some things as far as workers and all of that that we know as state legislators would not have been in there were it not for the work of the House Democratic Caucus, the CBC, the Hispanic Caucus, Asian, and Native American. And so I always try to acknowledge help, but what we're doing at the state level is taking a look at that stimulus package, because there were some things that would help state and local government that were not a part of it. We're appreciative for what was in it, but we're scrutinizing that package so that we can see and have conversations with our delegations across the country about what else needs to be happening. As Speaker Pelosi said, this was the first step. We want to make sure as NBCSL that we are part of the conversation of that second step, so that the needs of state and local government can be addressed that are not addressed in this first step.
Before I let you go, I wanted to let you know that I spoke with Paris Denard, who is an advisor to President Trump, about this package, and he was stating that there are some monies that have been directly targeted towards African American community members, for example, HBCUs, making sure that they still have money to function in this pandemic. I think he stated there was $13 million devoted to Howard University alone, and that there are other aspects of the Small Businessmen's Administration. Do you think the Trump administration has led the way correctly here? There's a lot of criticism back and forth between Republicans and Democrats, but in this new normal, which is quite abnormal, what is your take on all of this?
Well, I would not describe the actions of President Trump or his administration as having led the way. Mr. Denard, I don't know, but I recall that the money that was set aside initially for Howard University was fought against. So I don't know what the status of that is. As a proud graduate of an HBCU, the Florida A&M University, I am very interested in making sure that the opportunities that HBCU needs by an investment, a real investment. You know, they say in South Florida, not chump change, and I'm grateful for the $13 million. But when you look at this package, Kelly, quite frankly, that's not enough. I am really hoping that at some point, we can all recognize that we're all in this together. None of us are going anywhere. And we need to be real about this COVID-19 and really get familiar. Black folk, this business about, well, it won't affect Black people because of melanin in our skin. People, wake up. This is real, and it is deadly, and it's killing people, and we've got to be serious about it.
I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm glad you mentioned that. I was speaking previously to our conversation with Dr. Benjamin Chavis, who, of course, Black Press USA and the NNPA. And he stated that based upon their research, they have determined that 40% of those who are testing positive are African American. So it's important that we dispel any myths or misinformation that's out there and really get people to be proactive about their health, to safeguard their families and themselves, and practice all of the things that we're hearing from health experts.
And Kelly, you know, you talk about that percentage. Think about the number of people of color, Black, Latinx, and others who are not privy to testing. And so while we hear that figure 40%, we have to look at the other side of that number and say, okay, that's 40% of people who have, of African Americans who've been tested. How many people have not been tested? In South Carolina and Georgia and rural communities across this country, whether Black, white, or otherwise, the access to health care is impacted already, and what this is doing is exacerbating. You know, if they don't have enough tests to test white folk, no offense, that there is certainly an issue when it comes to communities of color. And that's a part of the message of NBCSL. Let's not look at these numbers and think it's not coming our way. Let's listen to what Governor Cuomo has said and understand that what New York is experiencing is 2 to 3, depending on where you are, weeks away. In some parts of our country, it may be 2 or 3 months away. But the reality is this is here, and we have got to take precautions. Stay safe, social distancing. Please stay home if you can. Give our first responders some relief by staying home.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gilda Cobb Hunter. I appreciate you so much for coming on the program.
Sure, Kelly. Thanks for having me.
Information and insight for us. Come back again. Keep us updated. We'll be following you and what you're doing with all of the good work that you're doing across the nation.
I appreciate that, Kelly. You be safe.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And we'll be back with more of the Kelly Wright Show after this. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Kelly Wright Show. My final guest of tonight is Vassie. She is known throughout the world, followed by hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who love her infectious music. Vassie, welcome to the program tonight. And you are a sensational performer. I've had the pleasure of hearing you and getting to know you over the years. And how does this COVID-19 pandemic affect your music and your career?
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having me and for your beautiful, kind words. Yes, Corona has been lots of fun. It's definitely affected everyone in the industry, in the music industry, big time, because a big part of the entertainment business is doing shows, and all the venues have been shut down. And so the next several months of my touring schedule has all been cancelled. It's been tough on a lot of us, actually, and we've all lost income. And even when things pick up again, I think it's going to be hard on the promoters because they've lost money, and it's going to become a little competitive and tough, I think, for people to get rebooked and rescheduled.
Well, we have to take it seriously, but we should make point of the fact that you've worked with some of the best in the industry, like Tiesto, and just the music that you have alone. You're so versatile, from doing anything from Billie Holiday to an acoustic Michael Jackson, Remember the Time, and then of course your own music, Lost and Bad, and there's so much great music out there. Do you think you'll keep streaming it, doing more Instagram or Facebook to keep people encouraged and distracted from this COVID-19?
Yeah, I have, but I've also felt that I need some digital distancing myself because it's kind of overload, and so I've wanted to take some time for myself too, because I think it's really important. You have to think about your fans, but you also have to think about yourself and do what makes you feel good and to get through the day. So I take a break, like a few days. I post every day. I'm trying to interact with my fans. After we do this interview, I'll probably jump on Instagram and do a quick live because I promised some of my fans that I was going to sing a couple of my songs unplugged. So I'll do that now. Just, whatever I can. Some people are pretty active. They're on every single day. Yeah. And I don't know. I think you just have to follow your mood.
Let's talk about your background real quick. We've got this moment, we've got this time, and we've got nowhere to go. So let's talk about your background for a little bit, because you're from Australia. You're Greek and Australian. You grew up in the country. You are a country girl growing in the outback. Tell me about your upbringing.
I'm a country outback Greek girl. That's funny. Well, my parents migrated to Australia a long time ago, about 40 years ago. And they had us. We were born and raised in Australia, in the northern part of Australia, a little town called Darwin, which is very known for a film that many Americans recognize as Crocodile Dundee. They shot that up there in my hometown. So it's a small town. It's country, but more tropical, like Florida type country setting. Okay. And it's a very remote part of Australia. So growing up there was tough. We didn't have a lot of opportunities, and definitely very remote. But it was safe and it was great as a kid to grow up there. But we were sheltered to some degree. And then here I am in America, living the American dream, which it's been an interesting journey. But my journey started from little old Darwin. But you know, I always say you can take the girl out of Darwin, but you can't take Darwin out of the girl.
That's good, Vassie. We're talking to Vassie, an incredible artist and performer. If you like dance music or if you like any kind of music, she has an incredible voice. We're going to share some of that with you when we return for my final word here on the Kelly Wright Show. Don't go anywhere or you'll miss a treat from my friend and now your friend, Vassie. Back with more of the Kelly Wright Show after this. Welcome back to the show. With me is my good friend Vassie. She's on the West Coast. I'm here on the East Coast, and we're literally socially distancing ourselves, but we're not isolated. And that leads me to my final word. You've heard me say on this program time and time again that in this new normal, which is quite abnormal, it is very important for each and every one of us to pay attention to what our government leaders, our health experts, and even our faith leaders are saying. And that is, make sure that we are doing everything we can to safeguard our families, our communities, and each other. But as I've often said, don't isolate yourself from the world. Reach out and touch someone, just like Vassie and I are doing right now. Let them know you care. Pick up a phone and call somebody. Text someone. Just let them know that you're all right and ask them, how you doing? And hopefully, as always, if you've watched this show, you've been righted, ignited, and excited and united to keep spreading love, freedom, and peace, not fear. So Vassie, that's how we do on the Kelly Wright Show. We don't spread fear, we spread love, freedom, and peace. And that's what you do through your music. Anything you want to part with before we leave and show your music?
Oh, I concur with everything that you said, and I love the philosophy behind it, the Wright, Kelly Wright, and I agree with you. I think it's so important for us to all do this together as a team globally. And if people think that it's okay to go out there, you're really compromising it for all of us who are trying to do the right thing to protect potentially your family members as well. So we just have to be patient, and like you said, do all the things that you don't get the opportunity to do when you're not at home, which is organizing stuff, but make sure that you stay connected with people. So I totally support that. And there's so many cool things to do. I was FaceTiming with my family the other day through Facebook Messenger, and there was 7 of us on this live, and we were all putting filters on our faces and just cracking up, laughing, having a good time, which was cool. But yeah, no, I just want to say, hang in there, everyone. We're going to get through it, and this virus isn't going anywhere too soon. So I think we just got to play our part to slow it down and pace everything out so we don't overload the health system. But I can end off by singing a little something for you guys if you want, Kelly.
You have the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, the great Vassie.
Oh, won't you stay for a while? I'll take you on a ride if you can keep a secret. Oh, won't you stay for a while? Show me dark, 'cause baby, show me secrets.
Love you. Peace out.
Love you too.
All right. See you, everybody.
Bye.
Feel the pleasure hidden in the pain. Feel the sunlight fall through the rain. But I search for you time and time again.